My background is banking, in focusing on risk and compliance issues, and I've been a subject matter expert in regulatory interpretation for about the past 14 years. As far as Compliance Assessor is concerned, it's been specifically designed to actually address regulatory risk, which is the risk of non-compliance and the penalties and fines and so on which can result from non-compliance, and even reputational risk as well.
Why would firms buy Compliance Assessor?
Very simply, Compliance Assessor accommodates an unlimited library of prudential and non-prudential regulations and laws. Against those, the firm can undertake an assessment to determine the state of compliance. More important is the fact that because it's been specifically designed for compliance and indeed audit functions, senior executives are not only engaged in the assessment process because they've got to be looking and approving at high-risk regulations, and by that I mean regulations which, if you don't comply with those, can actually have serious repercussions for the firm concerned. Unlike the other compliance products which Lombard Risk provide to major financial institutions throughout the world, which require interface with legacy systems for producing reporting or complying with reporting requirements, both co-rep and FinRep reporting requirements. Compliance Assessor has been designed to enable companies actually see the state of compliance across the board. We can actually import legacy data into the application, and we can also export reports and data in a variety of formats.
What would you say were the major challenges firms face in being compliant?
There are two issues. One is actually keeping on top of the regulations which are constantly changing, as the EBA and other regulators refine the way in which they regulate firms. But probably the biggest issue which compliance functions face is simply the lack of resources. Over the years, they haven't been invested in because they've been seen as a cost to the bottom line, and they've focused their attention on high-risk areas within the business, but measuring high risk in terms of the cost to the bottom line. And as such, the way in which they've been approaching it, their compliance model, has been very siloed, in effect. Under the new regime, the regulators expect firms to comply with all applicable laws and regulations. Okay, they've said that their approach is going to be judgmental, but nevertheless there is that requirement to comply. But the problem is, when you think of even a relatively small bank in the UK or in Europe, they are subject to literally tens of thousands of regulations. And that may seem to be an exaggeration, but if you look at the Basel II requirements alone, they accounted for over 5,000 regulations. But when you start talking about Data Protection Act, Consumer Credit Act and so on, then the numbers mount up. And for the cross-border banks, their regulations are measured in excess of 100,000 regulations. And being able to actually determine the state of compliance against all those regulations with limited resources is a major challenge. And the only way in which they can sort that out is to actually change their compliance model and use a tool such as Compliance Assessor.